Hey there, everybody. Greetings from mainland China. If this is your first time tuning into the channel, I want to tell you a bit about myself. I'm an American expat. I've spent over a decade here in China. I've traveled throughout the country. I speak the language, and I generally know how China and Chinese people tick. I know it sounds like I'm maybe tooting my own horn here, which I'm not trying to do. I'm just letting you know a bit about my background and why I can speak on this with authority. Most of the places I've stayed in China have had a very small expat community, and some of the places haven't had any other foreigners at all except for me. So the good part about that is it forced me to learn Chinese. I got a lot more experience interacting with just common Chinese folks. And I know that recently China has been trying to bring their tourism sector back to life because after the pandemic, it just plummeted and it was not coming back. But recently they have been loosening visa requirements, and for most countries around the world, at least most of the developed world, there are short-term visa-free options for you to come to China, and that has been bringing in somewhat of a surge of international tourism here to China. And with that backdrop, I thought it would be important for me to make a video discussing what types of people probably shouldn't come to China. And this is a short list. I've only got 5 main points that I've put on here. And if one of these applies to you, it doesn't mean it's a deal breaker and that you can't come. It's just letting you know that things may not be as smooth or as comfortable as you're used to back in your home country or in some other countries. So let's get to the first point. If you are a pothead or a regular user of Mary Jane, and someone that's used to toking up on a regular basis and you just can't get enough of it and you feel like staying away from it for a period of time would be a problem for you, then China is not the place for you, because while you're here, even if you could potentially find that stuff, trust me when I say you had better just stay away from it, because the amount of trouble you could get in here for using that, possessing that, is a pretty big deal. It would be serious trouble for you. So if that's just something that you cannot live without and you feel that when you came to China, you would probably try to get your hands on some, I would highly encourage you to choose a different country and don't come here. The next type of person, someone who is politically outspoken. In the Western world and in a lot of just open societies and democracies around the world, sharing your political opinions is common, it's even encouraged. And as a result, in a lot of countries, especially mine, you get a lot of bickering back and forth and arguing, and they're always at each other's throats. If you disagree, this person's that. And if that person thinks this, then they must be that. It's a true shitstorm. And honestly, I'm not a fan of it, but I am a fan of the fact that people can express their opinion. But we all know the type. There is that type that has a lot of opinions and they just can't keep their mouth shut. Even in situations where normal people would be able to just bite their tongue and zip it, some people can't. They've got to put their opinion out there. They're very opinionated and they just have to blurt it out. If you're that type of person, I would encourage you to maybe choose a different option besides China, because there are quite a few politically sensitive topics here, and if, God forbid, you ended up in a situation where that got brought up and you didn't know where to draw the line and you couldn't keep your mouth shut, you could end up in a terrible situation. I mean, not only could you possibly have some locals extremely angry at you, but you could get in actual legal trouble as well. And I'm going to put a footnote under this. Also, if you are a person who has had strong opinions, maybe you follow a lot of China-related news and you put critical opinions about China's actions in the past related to any number of issues. If you have been critical of China, and if you have any sort of a sizable platform, like on social media or something like that, then I would say China wouldn't be a good option for you. Because again, you could be in legal trouble upon arrival, and that wouldn't be a good thing. Point number 3, if you're someone who is extremely crowd averse, then China is not the place for you. For a long time, it seems as far back as most of us can remember, China held the crown for being the world's most populated country. Nowadays, they no longer sit atop the throne. India has overtaken them, but they're still number 2. They still have over 1.3 billion people. That's a lot of people. And while it is a big country, most of the population is concentrated in certain areas. There are plenty of areas in China that are very desolate. So that means when you go somewhere in China, especially if it's a tourist destination, let's say, for example, the Great Wall, or just any number of cities, even if you just go out shopping, the crowds can sometimes get a bit overwhelming. So if this is a serious issue for you and you just do not do well around crowds, I would say probably don't come to China, or if you do, plan out your trip carefully and try to choose less common areas that may not be as crowded, and definitely avoid tourist traps. Next thing on the list, picky eaters, beware. If you are a super picky eater, then China probably will not be the place for you. If you're a foodie and you're adventurous and you like to try foreign foods, you'll have an amazing time in China because there is no shortage of interesting dishes to try. But some people get a little bit finicky in terms of hygiene, in terms of wanting to know every little thing that's being put in their dish. Some people just have a very simplistic palate and aren't good at accepting or trying other foods. If this applies to you, then you'll probably have a rough time in China. And also, if you're vegetarian, you can still pull it off. I have known plenty of vegetarians in China. But it's not that easy. In China, a lot of times you'll order what looks to be purely a vegetarian dish, but there will be little strips of meat in it, or it might have been cooked in something that had a little bit of meat broth in it. So if you're super picky or a vegetarian, just know that things may not be as easy as you were expecting or hoping for when you get to China. And then last on the list, number 5, can you do a deep squat? Feet on the ground, you squat down, your butt goes pretty close to the floor. I know that a lot of people cannot do that, especially as you get older or if you're obese. And just a lot of people in general are not very good at doing a deep squat. Now, why do I mention that? Well, in China, a lot of toilets are still squat toilets. And yeah, most places you will be able to find Western-style toilets. But there are plenty of situations where if you go out to eat, maybe you're taking a bus ride and they stop at a rest stop, and the only type of toilet available is a squat toilet. Now, to use those, you need to be able to squat down. If you can do a deep squat or something approaching that with relative ease, you'll be fine. But if you're someone with severe knee problems, maybe hip problems, or just extremely lacking in terms of flexibility, then this is something that you might want to consider. And like I said, this is not a deal breaker. If you can't use a squat toilet, you can arrange your trip in a way to where you'll be going to mostly nicer, larger places. And for example, if you come to China and you go to one restaurant, before you sit down and dine, go take a quick look at the bathroom and see what the toilet situation is looking like. You know, a lot of times restaurants will be in a shopping mall or shopping center. Pretty much all of those will have Western style toilets. They'll have squat toilets and Western style toilets a lot of the time. You'll have both options. But you will want to check, you will want to keep this in mind, because I've been in plenty of situations, even in modern day China, where a Western style toilet is just not available. Hell, I was in a McDonald's just recently and I went to the bathroom and they did have a Western style toilet, but the seat had been ripped off of it. So if you wanted to try to use it, you had to sit directly on the rim, and it was covered in piss and pubic hair. It was disgusting. So you would need to keep the restroom situation in mind. Okay guys, I hope you have all found this video interesting. Let me know in the comment section below. If you have any other questions or concerns and you're planning a trip and you wanted to ask me about it, feel free to ask me in the comment section below. Or if you needed some help in planning your trip and needed some extra time and attention, please check me out on Patreon. We can talk privately there. Like literally, if you are coming to China and you are a Patreon supporter, I'll sit down and chat with you and talk to you about your trip and even help you plan it out. As always, a special shout out to all of my subscribers, all of my supporters, whether it's here on YouTube, Patreon, buymeacoffee.com. You are all amazing. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you in the next video. 下次再见。